Alrighty. Well, hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Monterey Bay Aquarium here live all across the internet, as well as on the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute's social media feeds. My name is Patrick. I work at the aquarium here in social media, and we are here once again for Mysteries of the Deep, talking about the amazing wildlife that we find all around the world's deep places. Joining me from her home a few miles away, we have, as always, Emily, the other half of the social media team here at the aquarium. Emily, how are you doing today?
I am doing fantastic, Patrick. Thanks so much for asking. Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Welcome, everyone. Patrick, how are you?
Oh, doing just fine over here. And as you can see here in the lower right of the video, we have joining us today the man, the myth, the legend, the master of the deep seven seas. We've decided that we can just come up with whatever monikers we feel like for Bruce because his work speaks for itself. We've got Dr. Bruce Robison here with us today. Bruce, how are you doing today?
Doing fine, thanks. Enjoying the intermittent sunshine.
Nice. How was that? How was that intro? Was that good enough?
Not bad at all.
Not bad at all. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining us right now. I've got a few clips of deep sea animals that are just going by. But very quickly, let's, as always, just do a quick introduction here. We are going to be talking about the deep sea and a lot of it coming from right out here in our backyard because we are very fortunate here in the Monterey Bay to have access to a deep sea canyon. You're looking at right now some footage of the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute. I'll be referring to it as MBARI for the rest of the time here. And as you can see here from this animation, we've got the aquarium over there on the left in Monterey, Santa Cruz there to the right and to the north from us, and in the center is Moss Landing. That is where MBARI is located, and that is at the head of the Monterey Submarine Canyon. Essentially, think of it as the Grand Canyon underwater out here in our backyard, essentially a mile deep from the rim of the canyon down to its deepest point, and then add another mile of water up above that. And MBARI is located in a really strategic location there because with their vessels, like this here, the Rachel Carson, or this here, the Western Flyer, they are able to go out, scientists and engineers, out into the deep sea within a day's trip. Aboard these vessels are ROVs, or remotely operated vehicles. This here is the Doc Ricketts that is aboard the Western Flyer, and here is the ROV Ventana, literally our window into the deep sea. And these ROVs go down with these cameras that are bringing all of the video clips that we'll be sharing with you today. And aboard the vessels, back up top, we've got our pilots and scientists just like Bruce here in the control room looking at the deep sea. So that's how we're bringing you this video footage right now. And with that, Bruce, I want to go to you. Today, we are going to be talking about the midwater animals that are there in this habitat that covers our big blue planet. Can you introduce us to your work at MBARI and also to this midwater world that we will be exploring today? And I'm going to start playing some comb jellies and different midwater animals while you go.
Well, the midwater is virtually everything between the sea surface and the deep sea floor. So it's the largest habitat on the planet.
To
It's
your work at MBARI and oh, it seems like we've got somebody playing the video there in the background there as well. So Bruce, the midwater, the largest habitat on Earth, something we talk about a lot. Is that we named the planet Earth when over 90% of it is, in terms of living space, is the ocean, and most of that is the deep sea. So that's where you spend a lot of your time researching and studying those animals that live in that midwater, right?
indeed, and because it's the largest habitat on the planet, we shouldn't be too surprised that most of the animals that live on Earth are found in that deep sea habitat.
All right, and for the folks out there right now, I'm playing some siphonophores up on screen, and I know that you are particular to dragonfish. I'm going to put up a black belly dragonfish here. Next, can you tell us what are some of the characteristics of these animals that live in that midwater? You know, we are used to walking around on land where we have to battle against gravity with our bones, and these animals are suspended in this water with no surface, no seafloor. What are some of the key characteristics of survival there in that midwater?
Well, one of the things that we have to get used to when we're trying to understand how everything works down there is that these animals are truly three-dimensional in a way that we terrestrial critters are not. They can move in any direction at any time. We humans are tied to the floor beneath our feet or the rock we happen to be sitting on. We lack the mobility to move up and down the way these animals do. And as a consequence, trying to understand them is really different than the kinds of things we're accustomed to. But as you go deeper in the oceanic water column, it gets darker, it gets colder, the weight of the water above you gets more and more, and that comes across as pressure. So the habitat itself is increasingly hostile, at least to we terrestrial creatures, the deeper you go. And yet the animals that live there are perfectly adapted to the habitat where they live. Their adaptations seem peculiar to us because we're adapted to a different kind of habitat. But all of those differences, all of those unique adaptations are what makes it so fascinating to study these animals, trying to figure out how it all works and what the different components of the community might be is why this is fun.
That's awesome. I don't know if you mentioned it before, Bruce. How long have you been studying the deep sea like this?
Boy, it seems like forever. I grew up in Southern California. I was a beach kid. I was swimming and surfing and scuba diving, and it just seems as though I kept going out deeper and deeper and deeper. So it's been part of my life ever since I was a kid.
Oh, that's wonderful. And speaking of that, we've got probably a few folks that are tuning in, parents and kids and grandparents, multiple generations of people here. Emily, any quick questions here for Bruce before we dive into some topics here? Right now, we're looking at deep staria, a deep sea jellyfish there, beautiful jellyfish. And if you have any questions about specific animals, let us know the timestamp and we can get to them. But Emily, what are the kinds of questions we've got here for Bruce in the Midwater so far?
Yeah. Lots of questions about some of the animals that have been popping up here, Patrick. But one question that I know is one of our favorites to ask all of our guests here. What's your favorite deep sea animal?
And you only get one. No, you can do a top three, Bruce, if you'd like. You can do a top three.
It depends on which day it is.
Right.
and who happens to be swimming in front of my camera.
Right.
I'm really partial to Vampiroteuthis. I like dragonfish, and I think it's difficult to pick or to select a particular organism. I really do like the Barreleye fish with the green lenses in its eyes and the transparent head. I like that one as well.
Oh, that's perfect. Well, I've got the vampire squid up on screen. We've got the dragonfish here, but maybe, let's go to the Barreleye because for those of you folks out there who might be playing the video game Animal Crossing, it is one of those fish that you can actually find in the game and learn about. And the Barreleye, subject of many, many years of MBARI research. Can you tell us a little bit about the Barreleye? I've got it up on screen right now. It's a fish that is becoming more and more popular now, thanks to its presence in Nintendo lore now. Can you tell us a little bit about the Barreleye? It's up on screen now.
Well, those two green spheres are the lenses of its eyes. The eyes are extremely derived. They're very complicated. Each eye is a cylinder, and the eyes are directed upward. And on this video footage, you can see those two green spheres. Those are the lenses. And in the past, for about 100 years, maybe that's an exaggeration, maybe 80 years, people have been catching these animals occasionally in nets, but the nets were destructive, and they tore all of the material on the animal's head away, and so we had no idea what they really looked like. One day, a few years ago, we were flying the ROV down, and we came across one of these animals and almost didn't recognize it because they look quite different when you see them in their natural habitat without any damage. And so it took us a while to figure out what we were seeing. And then we began to enjoy the fact that we had an unprecedented view and could really learn a lot about the animal. If you see the way it's organized, one of the puzzles that we had always dealt with was with the eyes aimed upwards as they are in this footage. The visual field doesn't include the mouth. So we were always puzzled about how can they see what they're eating? And then after we came across one in the water, we discovered that the eyes can rotate. They can pivot from looking upwards to looking forward. And that's all involved with a pretty tricky feeding process that we were able to figure out once we could see them in their natural habitat. And indeed, when it comes time to feed, they rotate the eyes downwards so that the visual field does include the mouth, and they can see what they're eating.
That's amazing. And if you were noticing anybody, the graphics kind of hopping around the screen there for a little bit, that's because I was trying to find this photo. This is actually the cover here that you may have seen. They're promoting the live stream. It is the Barreleye. You can see there those lenses and that clear cap there over the head. So that's one of the most iconic fish that you've really ever seen from the deep sea. I'm sure two questions that I think will come up for most people is how big is Barreleye, and then what is it eating? Because right now it looks huge, obviously on screen. How big is Barreleye, and then what is it eating?
Well, as it turns out, the biggest one I've ever seen is only a few inches long, maybe 5 inches at the most. And their feeding process is pretty tricky. They're kleptomaniacs, let's say. They steal food from other animals, from medusae and siphonophores. And when we look to see what they've been eating, in addition to a wide range of little shrimps and copepods and other small animals, we almost always see the tentacles of other predators, of siphonophores or medusae. And so what we've discovered is that these fish steal food that's been captured, like that crustacean was, in the tentacles of another predator. And in order to get into that food in among the tentacles, the Barreleye has that transparent shield over its eyes in order to protect them from the stinging cells on the tentacles. So flying into a mass of tentacles like that, or I should say swimming in to steal a copepod or a little jelly that's been captured on the tentacles, puts the Barreleye at risk. And so that transparent shield over its eyes protects it from from those stinging cells.
And so there you go, everybody. That's some information that you certainly did not get in the video game when you first found your first Barreleye. And here is that siphonophore, that colony of stinging jellies. You may know a famous siphonophore, everybody out there. The Portuguese man-of-war is a siphonophore. It's just a different way for a gelatinous animal to be set up there in the midwater. And this particular siphonophore here, this rope-like siphonophore, there was a famous one that went. There was a viral clip that was going around social media a little bit ago of a very, very long siphonophore. Here's another one there that has caught a fish, and so that is potentially a meal there for a barreleye that would be looking up there. So thank you, Bruce, for that explanation. Emily, what kind of questions are people wondering?
Yeah, I mean, it's so easy to be just enamored with this, just such cool animals. So we're getting some really great questions coming in right now, Bruce. One of them, folks are wondering if there are any closest recognizable relatives to the barrel eye. So when we think of fish that might be related to it, that the common person might know, what's the closest one?
Honestly, there are no familiar relatives of the barreleye. The family that they belong to, the family of fishes that they belong to, is relatively diverse, and there are a number of different kinds of fishes from that family that inhabit mostly the deep sea. They don't all look like the barreleye. Some of them have a variety of different configurations. For the most part, they do seem to have very complicated and highly evolved eyes. But as for familiar faces, no, there's really nothing that most of us have ever seen except in deep water.
Gotcha.
That's really amazing.
Yeah.
And then for those amazing eyes that they have, are they similar to our eyes, or are they different? Are they seeing different colors and wavelengths than us?
Fundamentally, they're like our eyes in terms of the basic elements. But the way that those elements are put together is what's unique. The green lenses that you see there sit on top of two cylindrical tubes. And those tubes help to concentrate the light on the retinas, which are at the bottom of each of those cylinders. Down in deep water, where it's very, very dark, there aren't that many photons flying around to help vision. And so the structure of these eyes works to amplify, to concentrate and amplify what little light is available. The fact that the eyes are sitting there side by side and their visual fields overlap means that the light coming in each of the eyes can be combined and sort of double up the impact of the photons that arrive. So they're structured to allow the best perception of light and any image that's available down there.
Well, that is absolutely fascinating, Bruce. And the barreleye's eyes remind me of another topic we had been thinking about discussing here. I'm going to put up here the strawberry squid Histioteuthis here, which is known for having a large green eye as well. There it is coming up there on screen. We wanted to talk a little bit about the midwater squid. Can you tell us a little bit from Barreleye to Histioteuthis here with that beautiful green eye? What is going on there with these filters?
Well, the green pigment in the lenses of the eyes of both the barreleye and the strawberry squid are filters that help them to perceive the difference between the bioluminescence that their potential prey put out and the ambient light around them. Many animals that live in deep water many predators that live down there find their prey by looking upwards to see their silhouettes or their shadows against the lighted waters above. Animals that want to avoid predation that way often make bioluminescent uh, uh, patterns along their bellies that, in essence, erases the shadow. But bioluminescence is slightly different than the sunlight that reaches these depths. Excuse me. And the green filters in the eyes of the predators helps them to distinguish the bioluminescence from the ambient sunlight. So it's like an arms race. The potential prey, those patterns of light along their bellies in order to erase the silhouettes, and that works pretty well. But the predators have countered that move by putting green filters in their lenses that helps to distinguish the bioluminescence from the surrounding sunlight. So it's a battle between the predators and the prey to gain an evolutionary advantage and either increase or reduce the chances of preying on one another. With the strawberry squid, the big eye with the green filters in the lens, as you can see, is pretty much pointed upward. And that's, again, so that it can help to distinguish the silhouettes of animals above. The eye on the other side of the body is much smaller, and it's more or less aimed downwards, and it's looking for bioluminescence down in the deep, dark waters below.
That's amazing. And we were just sharing some different videos of that bioluminescence. So that living light there of potential prey. This one here was a lanternfish, and you can see there on its belly what are known as photophores that are making their own light there. And we had this dragonfish as well that has those twin rows there of light emitting organs on the belly there that can help them camouflage themselves from the downwelling light. So the folks out there watching might know that there's something known as counter shading in the world. With, if you look at a dolphin or an orca, a great white shark, you know that they're darker on top and lighter on their belly, and that helps them hide out from above and from below. If you're looking up, you're looking at a bright belly, and if you're above, you're looking at a black back. Well, in the deeper water, to find that brighter belly, or to have the belly match that brightness, they're making their own light there. So it's a similar idea in terms of camouflage there. So that's what we were playing there, is some lanternfish there with those photophores. Thank you so much, Bruce, for that explanation there on the strawberry squid and those filters. And I wanted to transition.
Sure.
Well,
over. You're exactly right, Patrick. You got the explanation.
Oh, I was so nervous over here trying to, I'm just gonna start trying to explain something while Bruce is on the phone. But no, that's pretty much the idea there. And I wanted to transition just over to something else that you mentioned you wanted to talk about. We're talking about those eyes of the squid. I now have up on screen here what's known as a cockatoo squid, the Galateuthis. And you wanted to talk a little bit about these crystal clear animals and some of the camouflage that they have to go through to disguise their eyes specifically, right?
Yes. Well, many animals that live in deep water, in the water column, are transparent. But there are some tissues in the body that you just can't make transparent. And eyes are one very densely structured organ that can't make transparent. And as a consequence, when an animal like this little squid wants to eliminate shadows, when it wants to counter illuminate in order to prevent a predator from seeing any shadow from below, the cockatoo squid here has luminous organs, photophores, as you described, on the underside of its eyes. Now, whatever the orientation of the body, whether it's vertical or horizontal, those light organs are constantly shining downward. The eye doesn't change its orientation. The body of the animal may pivot through 180 degrees, but the eyes remain in a position where that tissue underneath is shining down and erasing the silhouette of the eye. The first time I ever flew up to one of these critters in a little submarine and was sort of staring at it eyeball to eyeball, it did one of those rotational moves. And I was just astonished to see that while the whole squid pivoted around, the eyeball stayed in the same position, staring back at me, just like I was looking at it.
Wow. Just a gyroscoped squid encounter in the deep sea, basically.
Exactly.
Amazing. And I'm sure folks out there have probably seen videos of birds like chickens being held and keeping their head in place like that. So a similar head move there for the squid.
Sure.
That's awesome. That's amazing. That's one of my favorite new facts about squid there. And this is, again, a cockatoo squid there. Emily, my mind is already pretty blown. I don't know how the audience is responding out there. We hope everyone was sitting down. We should have let people know before we went live here that it was going to be this amazing. What kind of questions do we have out there?
Well, one that I think that we're seeing across a couple of the different channels that we're live on right now, Patrick, is Bruce, when these submersibles, when the ROVs and otherwise go down to these dark areas in the ocean, how do the lights of our submarines and ROVs affect the fish and the other animals that aren't used to the light?
Well, that's something that has really concerned us over the years, because we want to know whether the behavior patterns or things like that we're seeing are an artifact of our being there, or whether or not this is actual natural behavior. And we've discovered a couple of things. One is that the eyes of these animals are so very sensitive that if they're exposed to bright light, like from the submersibles, their optical pigments are bleached out almost immediately. You know how if you look into a strobe, your vision sort of goes away. You can't see anymore because your retinas have been overwhelmed by the bright light. Well, we know that happens to these animals as well because we've brought them back to the lab, kept them alive long term, and determined that bright light does indeed bleach out their retinas temporarily. And so they probably cannot see us once they're initially exposed to our vehicle's lights. We also know from working with the animals in the lab that just like is the case with us, if we see a strobe light, if you are not continuously exposed to that bright light, that your vision recovers and it returns. So we think that for the most part, once we get past that first encounter, the animals are no longer reacting to our bright lights because their visual systems have been overwhelmed and they can't see the light anymore. We're also comforted by the fact that we know that as soon as we fly away, their vision will start to recover, and it won't be long before they can see normally again. We also know that the lights of the vehicle have different effects on different kinds of animals. Some animals are attracted to the light because they can see to find prey. Others are repelled by the light. So we have some tricks that we can use now and then to make sure we're getting a good idea of whether or not we're seeing natural behavior. If we put red filters over our white lights on the vehicles and project only red light, that's something that the animals can't see. The only wavelengths of light that make it down to these depths are blue wavelengths, and the animals' eyes are precisely attuned to blue wavelengths. But if we shine out red light, they can't see it. And so we like to confirm our observations that we make in white light with observations we make with red light. And we do that in the field as well as back in the laboratory.
That's wonderful, and that's actually something that we don't have video footage here. I was looking for it just now, but there's some really amazing video with some of the red light that I've seen from you all. And so similarly to how you might turn on your red headlamp back at camp so that you're not using up your full visual system there, different eyes see different parts of the light spectrum there. Thank you for that explanation. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Anything else, Emily, here?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. We're getting a lot of really great questions coming in, but I think this one is in particularly appropriate for the Midwater master here, talking with you, Bruce. Folks are curious, what is that experience like of being in the deep sea and studying these animals? Is it just hours and hours and hours of just staring at marine snow, and then every now and then you spot an animal, or how common is it to find those animals in the midwater?
The midwaters are surprisingly full of life, and it's not hard to find critters to observe and measure at all. There is lots of marine snow, but in amongst all those marine snow particles, there are lots and lots of animals. At different depths, you find different kinds of animals and different abundant patterns, different abundance patterns at different depths. For example, one part of the water column is an area we call the oxygen minimum zone. For a variety of reasons, the oxygen concentration there is quite low. And so you see relatively few animals in the oxygen minimum zone, although there are animals who are specifically adapted to inhabit waters with low oxygen in them. So in terms of finding animals to observe, to measure, to study, there is virtually no problem. There's always something there. You can't always predict what you're going to find, but there's almost always something there to study. It's a very rich and diverse habitat with many more animals than you might expect. And indeed, those of us who started out studying this habitat in the traditional way, the way that it had been studied for a century, which was by dragging nets behind a ship. Once we got into the habitat and could see with our own eyes from a submersible or with video eyes from an ROV, we were blown away by how many more animals were there than we expected based on just what we could catch with nets. And the reason for that is that so many of the animals that live down there are soft-bodied, gelatinous. And when they were caught by nets, if they weren't pushed right through the mesh of the nets to begin with, they were usually mangled and tangled and beaten up to the point where we had no idea what they even were, much less how many of them. So there is no shortage of critters to look at down there, but they certainly were not what we expected to find when all we had to go on previously was what we could catch with nets.
Right. Wasn't there like a deep sea ooze or a deep sea slime that was reported back in those old days of just if you dragged a net, there was just like this weird ooze that you would find down there, and it turns out those were probably the bodies of many jellies that were kind of chopped up.
That's right. There was a whole new category of life that was described back in the 19th century that was based on just this goo that was a result of all these gelatinous animals being shredded and mashed into a mass. It wasn't until we could go down there ourselves that we realized that oh, this is a bunch of different kinds of animals.
That's always one of my favorite things. So many animals that are either juvenile forms or mangled forms of something being described as a completely different animal until
Well,
someone realizes that it was the same thing. Um, Bruce, I wanted to transition to something else. Speaking of bizarre mystery jelly, I'm putting up right now on screen what many folks out there have probably heard of as the mystery mollusk that has been a mystery mollusk for a mighty long time. And I've heard from discussing with you that there is some new information or new science about the mystery mollusk that's almost ready for publication. Can you tell us about the animal that we have up on screen, the mystery mollusk, as it's been known?
Well, now it's many years ago that we first came across this critter down in deep water, and there was a collection of some of the best invertebrate zoologists in the world in the control room of the Western Flyer. We came upon this animal, we zoomed in on it with the camera, and everybody just sort of stopped in their tracks saying, "What the heck is that?" We'd never seen anything like it before. Uh, we couldn't put it into a phylum. We had no idea what we were looking at. So we spent a great deal of time that on that first occasion studying it and getting video footage so that we could analyze it subsequently. And it took a long time before we realized that what we were looking at was a nudibranch, like the sea slugs, the colorful sea slugs that you see in shallow water near shore. This is the only bathypelagic, the only super deep living water column nudibranch in the world. And we've spent a number of years trying to accumulate enough information to correctly identify it uh, and to describe it. It turns out to be a remarkably different animal than any other nudibranch uh, in in what's known so far. Uh, we 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 find them only occasionally, and so it has taken a long time to accumulate enough information to do a really thorough description. But by now, we have been able to measure their oxygen consumption rates. We now know uh, what they eat. We have been able to find out about how they reproduce and how they release their eggs. Because we've taken our time and taken many years to complete this study, we have now the most detailed, complex uh, description of a new species than ever before. And as it turns out, it's not just a new species. It's not just a new genus. It's an entirely new family of nudibranchs. It's
Whoa.
been it's been a real adventure, but because it's so rewarding to be able to make that kind of a detailed description, we've really sort of up to the game.
Wow, that's amazing. As someone who I go diving a lot out here, in very very shallow depths comparatively, looking for nudibranchs. You folks out there may know them, like you were saying, Bruce, as those beautifully colorful sea slugs. Many of them very brightly colored from the food that they feed on. So a new family, you said, of nudibranch right here in front of you. That's the mystery mollusk, everyone. Amazing.
yeah. And Bruce, just to get an idea of what folks are looking at right now, how big is this mystery mollusk?
Oh, a big one may be about as big as your fist.
Oh, whoa, that's actually way bigger than I thought.
Yeah, it's bigger than I thought too.
Well, the little ones, of course, are smaller, but we've seen them about that size. And part of part of the mystery that still remains is that you can see this is a relatively slow moving animal. and yet it feeds on shrimp that are very, very speedy. We we have a real mystery there in that how on earth can this sluggish, slow moving animal capture shrimp that we know are very speedy, that have escape responses that are lightning quick. And yet, virtually every time we are able to look into the stomachs of one of these, there are remnants of the shrimp in there. And indeed, the color of the stomach there in the middle, that reddish color, is due to the pigments of the shrimp that they've eaten. How do they do it? We don't know.
Wow. What type of I'm going to put up here just a suggested shrimp. I don't presume to say that that is the same type of shrimp, but there is a shrimp there from the deep sea there, just for folks to look at that. Wow, amazing. I didn't realize they ate shrimp either. You'd think that they're just grabbing detritus, but
Yep, that's what we figured until we began seeing the antennae of the shrimp sticking out from their mouth. And then we'd collect the specimens and look inside and see, holy cow, there are the digested bodies or partially digested bodies of these shrimp. And
wow.
indeed, we've never found anything else in their stomachs. So again, still a mystery, and the mystery mollusks is how on earth do they catch their prey?
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing. You've never found little cardboard boxes with a stick and a string leading back to the mystery mollusk with like shrimp food underneath it, right? Like that wouldn't be what
Not
happens.
yet.
Okay. All right.
We're not ruling out that possibility.
Perfect.
We
Oh,
think that maybe that, and this is really speculation. Uh, uh, we call it a scientific wild guess. You see those finger-like projections on the tail?
yes.
At the tips of each of those is a luminous organ. And we think it's possible that the mystery mollusk is luring the shrimp by shining lights at the tips of those finger-like projections and attracting the shrimp in, and then having them bump into that big oral hood at the back of which is their mouth. But we don't know that. That's just speculation.
Wow. That's fascinating. And speaking of luminescent lures there, I'll just transition over to some animals that make their own light. Again, that bioluminescence. There's that anglerfish you represented there, Bruce, there in your icon, just moving over there. Emily, what kind of questions do we have there about the mystery mollusk? I'm going to start playing some bioluminescent animals, Bruce, to transition into that topic next. But Emily, what do folks want to know out there?
No, that's a great question. Folks are actually they have a lot of questions coming in, kind of related to what we were talking about before with a lot of these animals in the deep sea that we're talking about right now are gelatinous, and previous collecting methods used to kind of destroy their bodies and turn them into that goo. We didn't know what they were, so how do we collect them now? And with our ROVs, how are they built to be in this environment? Do we try and mimic any animals down there with our ROVs?
Well, as I mentioned, for a century previously, these animals, this habitat was sampled almost exclusively with nets, and as a consequence, these soft-bodied critters just never came through. We had no idea how many different kinds were down there. Once we were able to enter the habitat directly and use either our own eyes or video eyes to look around, we realized that there was an enormous number of gelatinous animals down there. The video footage, I think, will show how we use gentle capture techniques to collect these delicate, fragile animals. we're not dragging nets through the water. We're using the skills of our ROV pilots to fly collection chambers, sample chambers over the animal, and then closing them off so that they are collected very, very gently. And we can bring them back to the laboratory or back to the aquarium and have them survive indefinitely because they're captured
That's
so,
a great.
so gently.
Awesome. I think we had some audio there from Emily on the stream just come in there all of a sudden.
Always weird to hear my own voice.
No, it's good. The ghosts of Emily's questions past here. Yeah, I've been playing the detritus sampler, or the D samplers as they're called. They're collecting here a bumpy jelly there. And again, like you were mentioning there, Bruce, before, if you just drag a net through the ocean, pull it back up, you're not really going to know what the animal necessarily even looks like, let alone what it's up to there in the deep sea. So I'm playing a few different clips here of different tools that have been used. Here's one of a squid ink gun to see the response that a squid might have to smelling the ink of one of its predators there. Can you tell us about some of the deep sea experiments as this squid turns bright red with its chromatophores, its color changing cells there, allowing it to hide? Can you tell us about deep sea science trying to do experiments in this midwater instead of just dragging a net through it?
Well, indeed, experimental science is part of how we make progress. And if you can't go down and give an animal a little poke or try to influence it in some way, like squirting ink out of the squid or trying different kinds of stimuli to see what kinds of responses you get. If you can't do things like that, then you're sort of denied the opportunity to study things as thoroughly as you might like. And so our ability to go into the habitat, to enter it and to conduct what we call manipulative scientific experiments has greatly expanded our ability to understand how things work down there. We've learned that animals do respond to different kinds of stimuli, and that we can anticipate. We know what to anticipate when we provide certain kinds of stimuli. We are able to collect animals in samplers like that and measure their oxygen consumption rates. And we can measure any differences in oxygen consumption rates at different temperatures, or if the acidity of the water is different, because we can manipulate those characteristics as well. We can shine lasers. We can do a variety of things because we have the manipulative capability, because we're using very, very capable technologies to study these critters. If all we could do was look around, we'd still learn an enormous amount. But one of the great things about MBARI is that our engineers and operations folks give us new tools all the time that let us study these animals in intricate and complex ways. If we were trying to study a forest and all we could do was walk through the forest, we'd get a different picture than if we could put out bait or try different kinds of techniques to understand how the animals interact. So we have a tremendous advantage now in terms of understanding how all this works.
Right. So here I'll just put up on screen. There's the ROV Doc Ricketts, and here's back in the day the HMS Challenger, one of those expeditions that would go around dropping nets down, pulling them back up to make surveys of the world. And then here's a BB and the bathysphere. And I just wanted to put this up on screen to transition back to something I've been wanting to ask you this, Bruce, for for a while. I've heard tales of yourself going into the deep sea to go and just enjoy the fireworks of the bioluminescence in something similar in appearance to the bathysphere. Not exactly this, of course, but can you tell us a little bit about your personal voyage into the deep, and then watching the bioluminescent lights that I'm going to be playing right here? That is something I wanted to ask you about, that the personal firework display that you sometimes got to enjoy there in the deep sea.
Well, I've been very fortunate in that I've been able to spend many happy hours down in the deep water column myself, in submersibles. My favorite little sub is a one-person sub called Deep Rover, and you sit inside a transparent acrylic sphere. You can trim it out to neutral buoyancy. You can fly it around like a little helicopter. It's a tremendous observation platform. But one of the things that I enjoy most when I have the opportunity is to go down to depth and trim the vehicle out to neutral buoyancy so that it just floats there. And then I turn off all the lights, all of the outside lights, all of the inside lights. I let my own eyes dark adapt. It's 5 or 10 minutes if you really want to do a thorough job. And then I just watch what's happening around me. The great majority of animals that live at depth in the water column are bioluminescent, and they're constantly communicating with one another using that bioluminescence. My friend Edie Witter says that there's no doubt that bioluminescence is the most common form of communication on Earth, given how many animals possess it and how many of them use it. But for a person like you or me to be able to go down and sit in the middle of that conversation, watch what's going on, what's being said, is a tremendous experience in terms of, that there's a great deal of communication going on here. But as yet, we have no idea what they're saying to one another. So that experience is something that's hard to forget.
Wow, that's awesome. Thank you for describing that. Sitting in the middle of that conversation, I'd never heard quite that turn of phrase. That's really, really amazing. Thank you for sharing that, Bruce. I've been wanting to ask you what that's like for a while. Emily, what we've got, looks like we got about 5 minutes left here on the stream, give or take. So we're nearing lightning quiz, rapid fire grilling round here, Bruce. Emily, what are the folks wanting to know out there?
Since we are just talking about that bioluminescence, a lot of folks are curious if the animals can change the color of their bioluminescence.
Ooh.
For the most part, no. There are a few species that produce light of a different color. Blue light travels farthest in seawater, and so in terms of efficiency, that's the most useful wavelength to produce. There are a few animals that can produce red light, and they have the optical pigments that will allow them to see red light. But for the most part, all of the light is in the blue range, and the optical pigments of the animals that live there, if they have eyes, is tuned exclusively to the blue wavelength. On the other hand, there are a few predators who can shine red light, and they also have the ability to see red light, and it's sort of like having night vision goggles.
Yeah, and I have one of those up on screen right now, the shiny loose jaw that we've talked about previously, having those red headlamps there underneath the eyes. And then here is the dancing bristleworm Tomopteris, which I believe produces a sort of yellowish bioluminescence there.
That's right. That was a real surprise when we came across that worm, and it squirted out yellow luminescence. That was something we had not anticipated. And yet we're always being surprised by the things that these animals do. It's still a region of mystery and amazement. There's so much we don't know yet that we, I don't think we ever make a dive where we don't find something new, something we were unaware of, some new facet of ecology or behavior that is a revelation.
That's wonderful, Emily. More questions from the folks out there. I'm going to find something different here to play. I'm just going to go with some coral now, just for fun. No, we're staying in the midwater. I'm sorry. What am I doing? Here's an amphipod. Okay. All right.
There you go. Well, a lot of folks curious about how deep down in the ocean a lot of these animals that we're looking at are, and how long does it take to get to those depths?
Well, animals live all the way from the near surface waters all the way through the water column to the deepest parts of the deep ocean trenches. There are animals in the water column throughout. Different kinds of animals live at different depths, but the water column is filled with life throughout. There are gradients, of course, but for the most part, you can find animals in the water column anywhere you look. And of course, the deeper you go, the longer it takes to get there. My problem is that I may start a dive saying, okay, we're going to 1,000 meters and we're going to start doing this and that once we get there. The problem is that on the way, you keep seeing all these cool things and you're telling the pilots, whoa, wait a minute, stop, what's that? Let's look at this. And so our ability to progress rapidly from one depth to another is usually inhibited by the fact that we're distracted by all the cool stuff we see on the way.
So the goal would be to limit or just to turn off all the video screens and just let it go down through the dark to really make it to that point. But there would probably be mutiny on board if that were to actually occur.
Well, what usually happens is the pilots will say, I need the lights so I can fly my vehicle. I'm going to put a bag over your head so that you're not distracted.
Oh, that's wonderful.
That's pretty great. Another great question just came in over on Twitch, Bruce, and I don't know if we know the answer to this, but how do sleep or rest cycles work for these animals in an environment where there really is no day and night?
I think we don't have a clue, except that when the sun goes down, a lot of these animals move up into shallower waters where they do a lot of feeding. When the sun comes up the next morning, they move back down into deep, dark water, so that we know that there are patterns in their behavior and in their distribution in the water column that are tied to a solar cycle. The reason that this takes place in a general sense is that animals try to stay in the darkness so that visually cued predators can't see them. And so when the sun comes up in the morning, they move back down into deep, dark water. And when the sun goes down and the upper layers are dark, they can move up and feed where the base of the food web is. So we see those kinds of patterns. But in terms of anything more specific than that, we have no idea, I think, of any other kinds of cycles. But that movement up and down, keyed by the presence or absence of sunlight, is the largest mass migration on the planet. It happens every day throughout the world ocean. And it's a tremendous phenomenon, but something that most of us never know about because we never see it.
So cool.
So fascinating, Bruce. We could just keep asking you questions forever here. But we have just now hit the 1 hour mark here, and we do want to be mindful of your time and of our viewers. We'll definitely have to have you back on, unless you feel like you've run out of things to talk about, Bruce. Let us know if you feel like tapped out and with the deep sea. If you've kind of like done it now that you've talked to us, that's pretty much it.
No danger there. We've got lots of stories to tell.
Wonderful. Well, thank you to everyone who's been sending in their questions. I wish that we could have gotten to all of them all at once today. But maybe we can just kind of leave off with this one last question. Bruce, we have so many students tuning in right now and lifelong learners tuning in right now. But I've seen young kids tuning in. I've seen folks who are in college and graduating and looking to get into graduate school right now. Just fascinated by all of the amazing animals that we've had a chance to talk about and discover today. Do you have any advice for someone who would want to get into studying the deep sea?
Curiosity is a wonderful thing, and it can lead you to extraordinary opportunities. Um, this this field is one of continual challenges, but it's an exciting life to have. And frankly, I can't believe they pay me to do it. It's really exciting and fun.
All right. Well, thank you again, Bruce, for your time, for bearing with our superlative introductions of all of your different awards and accolades that we feel like giving to you. We'll have to have you back on the stream here again. But thank you so much, Bruce, for all of that information and for all of the work that you've done over the years and sharing it with all of us.
Mm-hmm.
You're welcome. Thanks to you both.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Emily, for fielding all the questions there from the audience at large. Yeah, I think we're pretty much going to wrap it up here. What do you think?
Perfect. Yeah, I saw lots of teachers and professors tuning in as well. Thanks so much for being here. If you're looking to share these videos, don't worry. The videos on demand will be available as soon as the stream is over on all of the platforms that we were just streaming on, from Twitch to YouTube to Facebook to Periscope. We've got you covered there. So these will be available to you to use if you would like. Otherwise, just again, thank you to everyone for watching and joining in the discussion with us today.
Thanks, everyone, for watching. This has been Mysteries of the Deep, the Midwater Wonders with Dr. Bruce Robison from MBARI. We will see you again soon on social media here for the aquarium and for the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute. Thank you so much for stopping by, and hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.